Hello ladies and gentle ladies, and welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial for Forge 1.20. And in this tutorial we're going to be covering key bindings. So I know this is a little bit different than the block entity kind of mini series that we've been doing. However, we're going to be covering key bindings so that in the next tutorial we can cover packets, which will be important for the tutorial after that on fluid handling. So that's why we're covering key bindings. I know it's a bit strange, but that's how we kind of have to do this. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is come into our client package, and inside of here we're going to create a new class, and I like to just call this Keybindings. Now alternatively you can put this class inside of your init package and call it like keybinding init. That would work fine. However, personally, I just don't really like the idea of doing that, so I like to just call it keybindings. You've got to remember that this class is obviously only client side, because only the client would know that you pressed a key. The server is not going to know that you pressed a key, and that's why in the next tutorial we can use packets, and we can send a packet to the server telling the server that we pressed a key. But for this tutorial we're only going to be able to do something client side with our key binding. So what we're first going to do is make this class a singleton. So we're going to go public static final, and this will just be key bindings, and we'll call this instance is going to be equal to a new key bindings, like that. And I'm just going to quickly turn off Copilot. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and make a private constructor for this, so we can't construct this outside of this class. And if you want, you can like handle some exceptions in there or whatever, but we're not going to worry about that. And we're also going to make this class final as well, so that just means that this is going to be a singleton. This can't be instantiated outside of this class. We're only ever going to have this one instance that we can access whenever we want to access these key bindings. So then what we can do is create a public final, and this is going to be a key mapping, and you can call this basically what your key is going to do. So I haven't really decided what I want this key to do yet, so I'm just going to keep this as, say, example key, and I'm going to set that equal to a new key mapping. And inside of here we first need to go ahead and define the specific name that should be given to this key when you go ahead and search it up in that menu. So generally you should do key dot and then plus your mod ID, so tutorial mod.mod ID plus, and then we're going to give it the actual name of the key. So note that this is going to be like the translation key that we can use in our lang file to translate what this key should define. So I'm just going to do example underscore key to keep it nice and simple. Then we're going to need to give it a key conflict context, and basically this will define how this key should conflict with other keys. For example, you may want to have a key that does something differently in the menu than it would in the game. For example, maybe whilst you're in the game you might have a certain key that does a certain thing, and then in the menu you might have that same key but it does a different thing in the menu, and you wouldn't want them to conflict because they're in different contexts. They do different things in those different contexts. So we need to define a context that we are going to use. So to access the different contexts, we can just do a key conflict context, and this is luckily just an enum, so we can supply the different ones. And you see there's only 3 different contexts. You have a GUI context, you have an in-game context, and then you have a universal context. Now for me, I'm just going to be using the in-game context, since all I'm going to do for now is just send a chat message, but in the next tutorial we'll also be using in-game context, and instead we're going to spawn a entity. So either way we're going to use that in-game context. Then we need to provide the actual key that should be used. So that is basically going to be the default key. So we can say input constants, and then we need to call get key. And in here we need to provide a key code and a scan code. So for the key code, we can use input constants, and you'll see that there are a bunch of different keys in here. So basically all of the different keys that you could choose are going to be inside of here. So I think I'm just going to say key P for now. It doesn't really matter, but that's what I'm going to use. So then we have the scan code, which I'm just going to put -1. If I'm being honest with you, I don't know what the scan code does. If you do know what it is, then please let me know in the comments and I will pin your comment. And then finally, we need to provide it a category. So I believe there is actually a way to get the default category. So I believe that's KeyMapping. There you go, KeyMapping. And then you have the kind of default categories here. So if you want to put it in any of those, then you can. I, however, am just going to make my own category, which will be for this mod. So I'm going to create a private static final string, and I'm just going to call this category, and that is going to be equal to key.categories dot, and then I'm going to do plus tutorialmod.modID. So this will basically be the category for my mod. And then all I can do is just provide that category in there. But obviously, if you want to provide any of those default categories, then you can just type one of those. So for example, category gameplay, then that'll put it in the gameplay category. But as I say, I'm just going to use my category. And that is all you need for the key mapping. You'll see there are actually a few other constructors. So if you want to use those, then you can. For example, you can just straight up provide the actual key code in here rather than using the whole get key stuff. And you can also provide the type, which I believe is like keyboard, mouse, etc. And you can use those if you want, but for us this will be perfectly fine, as we're just going to be using the P key. Now obviously you can rebind this key in the settings if you want. If you didn't want this to be rebindable, you wanted like a keybind is like set in stone, so it doesn't even show up in that keybinds menu, then you don't actually need to do any of this. You can instead just go ahead and actually check for the key being pressed when you need it to be checked. And I'll kind of show you that in a second, since we're going to now try and respond to these keys. We first, however, do need to go ahead and register these key bindings. So let's close this class and let's go into the handler package. And if you don't already, you're going to need to create a client mod handler. And this will just be a event bus subscriber for the mod and for the dist.client. Now, I already have clients set up in here, but we're not going to use that. We're instead going to create an @subscribe event, and this will be a public static void. And we're going to call this register keys. Now, that is going to take in a register key mappings event, which will be the event. And all we need to do is event.register, and we just need to pass in the key mapping that we're going to register. So as you remember, we have a singleton here, and we can just do instance.example key. And obviously if you had multiple, then you would just do event.register keybindings.instance. For example, like other key, right? And you would just do etc, etc, etc. But we only have our example key for now, and in the next tutorial we'll create another key anyways, so you can see how that works, just if you're a bit confused. Once we've done that, we can actually now go ahead and handle the key press. So what we can do is create a new class inside of handler in the client handler, and that's very important, and this will be a client forge handler. So this is basically just going to handle any events that are ran on the forge bus. So we can do @event bus subscriber. The mod ID is going to be our tutorialmod.modID. The bus is going to be bus.forge, And the value, this is optional by the way, needs to be this.client. So yes, this value is optional, but I just prefer to define it anyways, just so that it's pretty clear that this is going to be on the client. And then we can write at subscribe event, and this will be a public static void. Now you have basically two ways of handling key presses. I believe there is an event called something like interaction key mapping triggered event or something, in which case you can just check inside of there. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the client tick event, and we're basically going to check if our key is pressed every single tick. So what we can say is on client tick, or what we can actually just say is client tick to keep it maybe a little bit simpler. And we can pass in a client tick event, and all we need to basically say is if keybindings.instance.example key.isDown, then what we're going to do is say keybindings.instance.example key, and we're going to go ahead and consume click. What this will do is basically consume it so that for the next tick that won't happen. If you, however, wanted to check whilst the key is down, so do something every tick whilst the key is down, you can just not consume click, or you can say instead dot is. I believe there's a different method that you can use for that, but there is also, for example, is default, which basically checks if it's in the default state, and you do also have stuff like is unbound and stuff like that. But yeah, we're just going to use is down anyway, so that doesn't really matter. And then we're going to consume that click so that it doesn't continue. So we'll consume click. And you can also read kind of the description of consume click you'll see in here. For continuous querying, use is key down. So if you look in here, is key down. I'm not exactly sure what is key down is. That looks like it's maybe an outdated comment there. But I think basically is down is fine. So yeah, this used for continuous querying. So this should be used in tickers as it says, which is what we're doing basically. And then after you've consumed the click, you can just do whatever logic you want to do. So you may, for example, want to open a screen, right? You may want to do Minecraft.getInstance.open screen. Is that all right? Screen? Set screen, there you go. And you might want to open, a custom screen, for example, right? Or etc. You can do basically whatever you want as long as it is client side. So the important thing to note is that you can't, for example, do Minecraft.getInstance.level. You can't set a block. You can't spawn entities, you can't add entity, you can't do anything that kind of does interactions with the world. You can only do your kind of default things in here. So for example, what we're going to do is just send a chat message to the player. We're just going to be nice and simple. So we're first going to get the Minecraft, which is Minecraft is equal Minecraft.getInstance. Important thing to note, if you're not already aware, this Minecraft class is the client Minecraft, as you can see from the package import up here. It's in the net Minecraft client package, so that is a very important thing to note. Whenever you're using this class, you need to be on the client side, and strictly on the client side, because you don't want to load this class on the server side. And then we can say, for example, Minecraft.player, and we can say send system message. Or we can also use display client message as well. In fact, we'll do that and then we'll put it in the action bar instead of sending it in chat. And then we can send it over a component. So we can say, for example, component. And we can either do a literal or translatable, or you can do other ones as well, for example, keybind. You should be using translation components whenever possible. So let's go ahead and actually just create a quick constant for that so that we don't have to make it every single tick. So we'll do private static final component, and we're just going to call this example key pressed is equal, and we can say component dot translatable. We can say basically whatever you want inside of this translation component. I'm going to say something like message dot, and then plus our mod ID, so tutorial mod.mod ID plus example key pressed. And then we can translate that to whatever we want inside of our lang file. So I can just give it that component, and then we need to provide a boolean for whether it shows up in the action bar. So the action bar, by the way, is basically just the part that shows up above the hotbar. For example, when you're using like /title, I believe you can also set that to be in like the action bar. We're going to say true, because I do want this to show up in the action bar. Now you see actually that this is going to complain at us saying it may produce a null pointer exception. That is because the player could be null, right? They could not exist. We could be in a menu or something. So you might just want to check, for example, and Minecraft.player is not equal null. You could do something like that. And if you want to make that even simpler, you could say it's instance of local player, right? And you can say like L player, and then just say L player display client message, which keeps that even simpler, really. It actually doesn't like that because it's already a local player. So actually we can't do that anyways. We have to do a null check instead, which is fine. It doesn't really matter. And then obviously if you had any other key bindings, you would do those here too. So for example, we can put this in here, and we could say if our other key is down, right? So if we had another key, of course, we could say if the other key is down, then we can consume the other key click, and we can do whatever we want in here. So whatever. And that is basically it for what we need to do. Now, I am actually going to create the key that we're going to use in the next tutorial. We're going to do that now, just so that that's nice and simple. So we'll go public final key mapping. There we go. I'm just going to call this example packet key is equal to a new key mapping. We're going to pass in that description. So key.tutorialmod.mod ID plus .example underscore packet underscore key. We're going to give it that key conflict, which, as I said earlier, we're going to keep that as an in-game conflict, as we're going to spawn an entity when that packet is received. Then we're going to do input constants.get key. We're going to provide our key, so input constants, and I'm just going to say maybe V. I don't think V is used. It's hard to remember which keys are used. I don't think V is used. And then we can just say the category, which I'm going to keep as that category as well. Then obviously we need to register that as well. So let's do event.register keybindings.instance.example packet key. And then inside of here, we can say example packet key is down. Then we can do that. And then we're just going to do, we're going to send a packet to the server to spawn an entity. And that's what we're going to do. So now what we can do is just go into our lang file and obviously translate these. So we go tutorial mod lang, and then inside of here, we can say key.tutorialmod.example underscore key, and we'll just say example key. Then we're going to say key.tutorialmod.example underscore packet underscore key, which will be an example packet key. Then we're going to say category.tutorialmod. Was it just category.tutorialmod? I kind of forgot. Oh, it's key.categories. There you go. So not quite right, but almost there. Key.categories.tutorialmod, which will just be tutorial mod. And then also we have a translation for the message. So message.tutorialmod.example key pressed. We'll say message.tutorialmod.example underscore key underscore pressed. And we can say example key was pressed. Something like that. And now what we can do is we can go ahead and run the game, and hopefully everything should work. So I will see you inside of the game. Alright, so here we are. So let's go ahead and press our key, which I believe we set to P. So press that, and we can see example key was pressed, and that shows up inside of the action bar. Obviously, instead, if we wanted it to show up inside of chat, then we can give this false instead. And if I just hot swap that real quick, hopefully that we can now see that that says it in chat. Now that is another thing to note. You see it's actually pressed twice, and I'm like holding it down and it's pressing it multiple times, right? Which is a bit odd. And we can also see that it now says social interactions are only available in multiplayer. And that is because I believe actually the social interactions key is also set to P. Yes, you can see, so here you go, you can see it's actually got a conflict. So we can actually change this key to maybe something else. We could say K, right? So if we now press K, and you'll just have to trust me that I'm pressing K, we can see that it happens, and it presses twice. And the reason it presses twice is because it's once on once on down and then once on up, which is slightly problematic. And if I hold the key down, you see that it spams them basically. So I actually thought that consume click should fix this. However, it seems that what we actually need to do, instead of saying is down, is saying that it should consume the click. So let's actually try that, and we're going to do that for this one too. And I'm just going to do F3 and D, so I clear the chat, and I'm going to press K, and you see it now only presses once, and if I hold it down, it does actually still hold. So if you wanted to hold it down, you would actually have to have some logic that handles that. You would have to kind of hold some data in here and see kind of if it was basically held down during the last tick. So if that key was pressed during the last tick, then you would also have to handle that and then not proceed here, basically. It wouldn't be that hard. It's just kind of a little bit of a pain maybe to do that. But yeah, I mean, that works anyways, which is basically all we wanted. And obviously all those translations worked too. So if we go Keybindings, you can see our category works. That's down here. We can reset the key, so it resets to P. Obviously we could change, for example, social interactions to like Shift S maybe. Shift S is actually taken for walk backwards and sneak. So we could maybe say Alt S, which is used for walk backwards, of course. So, okay, we could say semicolon then, and then that would open the social interactions, and then P will press our key, and then V will press our other key, but obviously we don't know that it's pressing our other key. If we wanted to, we could also just send a chat message for that. So we'll do Minecraft.player. This time we'll just send a system message instead, and we'll say the same kind of thing, but it'll be a system message. So I believe it was, what did we set that one to? So let's just see, was it V? V. Okay, I'm pressing V and that's actually not working. So we'll just use display client message again, and we'll say true for this one. Oops, accidentally opened DaVinci. That's not good. V is actually not working, which is interesting. I wonder why. V is not working. Oh, has that failed to hot swap actually? No, it's not failing to hot swap, and it is definitely V, but I'm pressing V and that's not working. So that's very interesting. Sometimes you'll find that whilst a key is not used inside of any of these, right? So you can see V isn't actually used in here by any of these. Sometimes there are kind of protected keys, if you will, where they just kind of don't listen to a response. We can actually check, for example, maybe because we're using example key here, so this is meant to be example packet key. So there you go, that actually does work now. just a little silly mistake that I made there. And P obviously still works as well, V works, and then if I press semicolon, that brings you the social interactions. So that's basically key bindings, and as I say, in the next tutorial we're going to be covering packets, so that we can send a packet from the client to the server, telling the server that our key has been pressed, and then letting the server spawn in an entity for us inside of the world. And that will set us up for the tutorial after that, where we can cover fluid handling, and we need packets for that so we can send some data across from our block entity to the screen, so that we can like render a fluid on the screen. We need to use packets for that, so that's why we're covering packets now. But yeah, that's it for this tutorial. Obviously, I hope you guys found it useful, and if you did, please do be sure to give it a like and subscribe. If you want to help support me continue making these tutorials, then my Patreon is linked in the description down below, and if you have any problems, of course, then you can join my Discord, which is also linked in the description below. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next tutorial. Goodbye.